Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. My channel is Discerning What is True. Today is the 29th day of February 2024. I'm going to be reading from Gerald Massey today. This is Massey, a Egyptologist, also a Theosophist, and we're going to be reading from his book here. And his book is simply "The Bible is Not Holy," but it has some information, good information here that he shares. And I think it's vital that we uh, read some of this information. So thank you. This is the last part of his book. So thank you again, like I said, for being here. And let me get this thing the way I want it set up the way I want it to. This is simply entitled "The Coming Religion." Our friends, the enemy, end quote, cheerily assure us that certain things are settled once for all in favor of historical Christianity, and any further kicking against the fact is all in vain. If you show them that the Mosaic writings do not contain an original revelation to mankind, but are mosaic of Persian and Egyptian mythology, that the foundation of their creed are destroyed if the fall of man is a fable, they will tell you that does not in the least invalidate the authority of the Bible, nor imperil the Christian revelation. Oh no? The church has never committed itself to any particular interpretation. Let us throw up the sponge and continue the battle. Some of the apologists, in brackets here, as they call themselves without meaning it ironically, in bracket, pretend to think they are so secure that they can denounce any discussion of the Mosaic legends as intolerable, tiresome. They affect to consider the matter past discussion, but those same, quote, certain things, end quote, were never more uncertain or unsettled than at the present time. And when they do get settled, the occupation of those who preach them as God's truth today will be gone forever. If they have closed the controversy, we have just begun to open it. We have not done with the note of interrogation. Yet, if they had made and tied up the little bundle of old dry sticks, ours are beginning to grow and put forth a new leaf. Ours are yet green and lusty with the sap of a new life. These people have a vision of their own, and as it were bequeathed to them, they will not part with it, even though they have to close their eyes to see. They will die in the, quote, good old faith, end quote. But that is what others of us cannot do. We have but just begun to ascertain the meaning of the good old facts that preceded the good old faith. We're finding out that their names, the most hallowed, are spurious counterfeits of the ancient gods. We are learning that the literacy fortunes of the Bible were made by mythology and flicked from the peoples who have been spoiled as pagans and accused as the spawns of Satan. There is a spirit within us that wants to see with our eyes wide open and will see and must tear the bandages and blinkers off the eyes to see, each for himself, whether the traditional vision be false or true. Nature gave us eyes to see with. It was men who added the blinkers. Nature intended us to be led by our own eyes. It was men who substituted the system of leading by the nose, the mass of dough-faced humanity which church and state have tried so hard and so long to knuckle and mold for the purpose of leading it by the nose. We have found out nowadays that even the horses pull better without than with the use of blinkers. So ignorant are many of these men of what is being thought outside their own little world, they do not even know how the battle is going against them. They're in possession of a few crumbling outworks and do not appear to understand that the enemy is already in the heart of the citadel itself with the sappers and miners depositing their mental dynamite, nor care greatly, so long as the commissarian remains intact. And they can draw the usual rations. For their attitude is, quote, deprive us of what you please doctrinally and resolve all our mysteries into myth, so long as you do not disestablish and disendow the church, end quote. So long as the outworks are standing with them inside, they will not recognize defeat. And Orthodox Christianity is mainly built up of outworks or scaffolding. It is not the scaffolding, however, with which the institution was built, but one that conceals the true nature of the real building inside. The ordinary worshippers stand outside and mistaken the scaffolding for the real building and look upon it as it rises tier above tier like so many landing stages and resting places on the upward way to heaven. It has been my aim to penetrate beyond the scaffolding, though, discovering the secrets of the hiding place and contradict the false reports concerning the builders. And what we do find is that the so-called, quote, revealed religion, end quote, is simply unrevealed mythology. And that a spurious system of salvation was profited to those who would accept the ancient mythology transmorphified into historical Christianity. And he bribed into changing their old lamps for new ones. Orthodox preachers will go on asserting Sunday after Sunday in the name of God any number of things which their hearers do not believe. Only they have heard them repeated so often past all power of impinging or impurging until the sense is too outwearied to rebel. Things which they themselves do not believe if they could only afford to question their own souls. The Pall Mall Gazette has lately asked the question, if you have £100,000 to spare, what do you think would be the greatest charity to give it to? I should liked to have replied, quote, pensions off a few of those poor slaves of the pulpit who are forced to earn their living by preaching what they no longer believe, end quote. How little the Orthodox world dreams of the new dawn that is rolling up the sky gloriously with its promise of the brighter, better day. Nah, it is already flaming through the cobweb windows and trying to look in at the shut eye of the sleepers, which are fast closed or blinking at the splendor shining on their faces. They're still dreaming how to roll the world back the other way once more into the night of the past, even while they are passing face upwards beneath the radiant arch over their heads, alight with the dawn of a day that is not theirs, blind to the glory of his coming, deaf to the birds that soar and prophesy in song, senseless to an amazing apparition of the eternal growing visibly present in our world at time. Now and again the sleepers start, and you hear a troubled moan from those that dream, and know they dream, but are afraid to wake. And when they do wake, they will begin shouting for the fire engines to come and put out the flame of dawn, now reddening the skies with conflagration and the end of all things for them. If these men had truly cared for religion instead of their anthropomorphic theology, they would not have gnashed their teeth and shaken the fist at the alleged phenomenon of modern spiritualism, as they have done. They would have embraced spiritualism as if it had held out to them the strong right hand of salvation itself, just when scientific research is undermining and exploding the ancient beliefs that have been falsely founded on mythology. Just when the materialists think they have discovered the great secret of life in protoplasm. And we are on the verge of finding the mechanical equivalent for consciousness, just when some are assuming that force comes from the visible side of phenomenon. That mind is but a property of matter, an effect rather than a cause, and thought is nothing more than a result of molecular motion. Just when the scientific report is that the deeper we dive physically, the further off recedes the heartbeat of eternal life and breaks this revelation from a world unknown. And as it was assumed unknowable. And these alleged phenomena contains the sole possible, palpable, natural evidence of a future life that men have or even did have or ever can have to go upon. But no, what they care for are the old wives, fables, and the figments which have become their heredity stock in trade. The facts may go to the devil, to whom indeed they generally consign them. For it is God himself who tries to speak with them in this way from behind the mask of matter to prove the fact they say it cannot be our God. He is dead and buried in a book. This must be the devil. It is the devil. They have succeeded in substituting the non-natural for the natural, making men believe that this sham was the supernatural. They have taught us to look for God in the wrong way. They have based religion on erroneous grounds. They have made us the victims of false beliefs, and a false belief will make despicable cowards of men who would otherwise have looked facts in the face and been true to themselves and honest to them others. They have evolved our respect and reverence by means of the whip. And now with the stick and scourge, the knout and whip have lost their terrors, have done their worst, and had their day. It is found that religious reverence has vanished also, and the young are becoming utterly skeptical in most things before they are old enough to be in earnest about anything for which the false teaching is responsible. The young have been disgusted with the ancient object of reverence, the grim and gory ghosts of the anthropomorphic God. We're constantly hearing complaints respecting the reverence on the part of the young for the old. But if they are old fools and old women of the wrong sex, why should they be reverent? It's said the children of this generation have no reverence for God or man. But if the reverence was evoked by the stick and the reign of the stick is over, what are you going to do? It is of no use complaining, and probably it is too late to think of getting a new stick. Before condemning, however, let us look deeper. Why should we expect reverence for such a God as we have allowed to be set before the children? Such a God as that of the Hebrews, who cursed all mankind because one of them, and the first one, ate an apple. A God for whom David was a man after his own heart. A God who revealed himself to Moses, a posterior reverence for such a deity used to be inspired by hellfire. And now the fires of hell are going out, in fact. As Horace Gringley says, there are not half the people damned nowadays that ought to be. Only we want those to be the proper sort. What right, what reason have we to expect intellectual reverence for the parents themselves, who pretend to believe and permit such teaching as has been imposed on their children? They are most likely to be looked upon as old fogies or hypocrites and fools by the younger generation as it rises up to sit in judgment on them. Reverence must ultimately depend on the object presented for reverence. The first necessity is that it shall be a reality and not a sham, not a swindle, not an imposition to be found out, whether as a father in heaven, a father in the church, or a father in the family. Possibly the pious pretenses and the pious pretenders are being found out by the younger generation. But the various larking has no lack of respect for the cricketer Grace, the sculler Beach, or the fighter Gordon, because these, in their way and range, are living realities. And if you want to have delay, respect, or religious reverence, the object must be a living reality that is worthy of it. Neither men nor women nor children will much longer bow down to a false authority or believe blindly as they have done hitherto perforce. The world is waking from its phantom dreams to make out that which is from that which seems. People now demand the verification of all that is taught as true. They must see for themselves that which is set forth as the truth. They must touch it and test it to learn whether it has the ring of reality. The demand of the present is that they which, I'm sorry, the demand of the present is that which is asserted by the teacher shall be verifiable by the learner in every domain of thought. All the range of nature, all that exists, being ready to supply the means of practical experiment for attaining the sure foothold of a scientific basis. It is true that we are still compelled to battle vigorously, that is, and spend life freely in fighting against the shadows and phantoms of today that are thinning out and will be seen through the tomorrow, compelled to fight them and to expose their false pretenses, because so many still mistake them for solid realities. But the people, men and women, and little children, will err. Will err long arise and say to these our purblind spiritual teachers, quote, "Begone, you foolish preachers, howlers, snuffers, and screechers, you miserable teachers, you God of blood beseechers, you forgers of God's creatures, who made us the devil's creatures. Shut up, you foolish preachers. Get out, you hellfire screechers. Go home, you played out preachers." And the cry will come in sterner tones. Let the war drums of the workers roll out with their battle thunder now, and drown the gabble of all the foolish, fruitless wars of words. 18 centuries since the religion of faith, the quote, good old faith, end quote, began to take the place of knowledge. Its history is one long and gory record of battles of belief versus knowledge, of faith, of war with facts. What is there that man has not found compatible with faith that was all the while at war with facts? Have they not cut each other's throats, believing it to be for the glory of God? Have they not burned bodies by the thousands, believing it to be the sure way of saving souls from hellfire? Have they not made the cross into the hilt of the sword to give them the better grip hold of it while slaughtering minarets for the faith? Men have believed that they should find God if they unsexed themselves and got sufficiently removed from humanity. And we so have gone out as hermits into the wilderness of monkery, which was like going into the pitch darkness on purpose to see your face in a looking glass. Men have believed that their God was the natural author of the diseases and evils which they created and fostered for ages, or permitted, and are responsible for before God and man today. They have believed that in the fields of human souls, Satan was the great harvester and God only the gleaner. Do but think about woman has suffered from the belief, the foul and foolish calamity about that has she was the cause of the fall of the human race. She ought never to forgive it. She ought to wake up and work and sleep no more until their lying libel is dead and damned, and the whole system of false teaching to which it belongs is swept out of the world forever. Men have believed in a God who was an omnipotent fiend and demon quite unknown to the devil worship of the past, a curse that sat enthroned amid the universe, breathing horror of abroad. And brooding down in blackness on the souls of men. And the ascending smoke of torment was so to magnify the features of his monstrous majestic. And if he were one of the chosen, elected to a front seat in the kingdom of this dreadful God, the dandiest part of your enjoyment was to be a full and perfect view of the poor tortured souls, including those of your own wee babies, a span long, the mites and midgets of hell. The inspired Mr. Spurgeon will tell you what a delectable entertainment you may expect, for he says, quote, "All their veins are roads for the feet of pain to travel on, and every nerve is a string on which the devil shall forever play his diabolical tune of hell's unutterable lament," end quote. Then as the song of the ransom was being sung, word would come that your father was among the damned, and you would sing all the louder, or that several of your little ones were in hell, and your hallelujahs would be redoubted. And Orthodox hearts have been warned, and hands exalted rubbed over these pictures in the fire, which have been enjoyed with an infernal relish. Moody, and this is basically what I'm gathering simply is that when he speaks about Spurgeon, Mr. Spurgeon is in England, a preacher, well known, back in the 1800s, late 1800s. And then Moody, who's the one here in the United States, the ranter tells a story of his God. A poor, foolish, fond mother in Illinois had a little child that was sick and ailing unto death. When thinking it was dying, she could not bring her rebellious mind to say, quote, "Thy will be done," end quote. She called on God to spare her babe. She cried to him, "Oh God," end quote. This is in quotes. "Oh God, I cannot give up my little one," end quote. And the Lord heard her prayer and answered it too. He snatched the child from death and gave it back to her, turned into an idiot for life. Sorry. That was a small, smart specimen of divine decision that is promised in the Bible. Quote, "The Lord shall have ye in derision," end quote. He had her there. Such was the, quote, "good old faith." Under such a creed, the fathers were rendered unfit to beget a race of free and fearless men. Under such a creed, the mother's womb has been turned into a prison house of fear and trembling for the embryo that was wrapped and swallowed in a pall of gloom where it was born. And the divine spark of soul almost extinguished by the maternal deposit of Calvinistic cloud. You're speaking about John Calvin now. You're nothing but worms in the sight of God. That's a lie, folks. That's a lie. I heard it many times in my own life. This Christian scheme, if true, could only lead to eternal wretchedness all round, torments in heaven far worse than all the miseries of hell. Who could be selfishly happy in heaven with a knowledge of everlasting hell? A Hindu commentator on the creeds remarks, quote, "One of their teachers said to me lately that all my people, about 800 million every 50 years, must assuredly go to hell. At the same time, placed before me a picture of their heaven, asking me to, quote, flee from the wrath to come, end quote, and escape the horrible vindictiveness of their God of love, end quote. The profoundest appeal made by the Christian creed has ever been made to fear. The bogies of the human childhood have been continued by it and applied to prevent our growing up into women and men. Fear of eating of the tree of knowledge, fear of hellfire, or the flames of earthly martyrdom. It is fear still, even when it is dwindled down to fear of Mrs. Grundy, I should say. From first to last, the appeal has always been to fear, whereas all the fear in the world could never get from human beings any more than the affection of a dog that licks the hand of its tyrant at feeding time, when there is no whip to be seen. Religion for ages has been a reign of terror under the oppression of which it was impossible for so tender a flower as love to flourish. It did not dare to breathe forth its natural sweetness to its own maker. The deepest religious sense that merits have ever developed all through life has been a mortal dread of death. The burden of religion in the past has been, quote, prepare to die, end quote. And this is preached with damnable iteration to those who have never yet lived, have not yet begun to live, and do not know how to begin to realize the glorious possibility of living. And what is the spiritual result of all the fearful teaching, according to the good old faith? Is it such a sense of another life and a better world that the concerns of this world are dwarfed and rebuked in its majestic presence? Not at all. The mass of people who are called religious do not want to believe in a spirit world, save in the abstract, as a necessary article in their creed. They are mortally afraid of the other world. Their foremost feeling is to draw down the blinds against any light breaking in on the subject from another world. They accept a secondhand belief in its authority as a grim necessity. It's best to believe in case it does exist after all. As the old woman said, "Ah, sir, it's best to be polite, or you may go to the devil." End quote. But you must know that a great deal of belief on the subject is like that of the Scotch woman who was asked how she felt when the horse ran away with her cart. She said the quote, "put her trust in Providence till the breeches broke, and then she gave up." End quote. She relied upon the visible and tangible link of connection. Her providence was the breeding. When that was gone, her faith collapsed altogether. For 1800 years, they have pretended to teach men how to die, but the first duty of men who have to die is to learn how to live, so as to leave the world or something in it a little better than we found it. Our future life must be the natural outcome of this. The root of the whole matter is in this light. The founders of historical Christianity began with an utterly false theory of life. They mistook the anti-physical for the spiritual, the anti-natural for the divine. Life was a disease, and death the only cure. Worldly blessings were cursed in disguise. Belief would work miracles, and doubt ensured damnation. Sense was the natural enemy of the soul and had to be suppressed. The most beautiful human body was a dungeon of sin and death in the prison house of a doomed world. More spirit than common manifested by the youngsters was the very devil in revolt against authority and had to be put into mandals. All nature was unhallowed, all flesh defied until they had pawed it over with priestly rites of regeneration. This Christian scheme of salvation is a false method of dodging the devil at last. People will no longer believe in the lying delusion when once they learn that there is nothing to be got out of, no good to be gained by it. Its success hitherto has depended on the appeal to selfishness. Next to fear, the chief appeal has been made to the desire for gain, what are considered to be the supreme expressions of Christ-likeness in the Gospels to often denote a low and vulgar type of morality, or they become immoral in their appeal to selfishness. Quote, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." End quote. Quote, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy." End quote. "Blessed are the poor who are content to give up this world. Theirs is the promise of felicity forever in the world to come. He that giveth to the poor is making a safe investment, because he is lending to the Lord." Quote, "Be ye good bankers." End quote. Is one of the most significant sayings. The appeal is continually made to the sense of personal gain, nonetheless selfish because it is applied to the next world instead of this. On the contrary, it is increased because the promise of gain is to be eternal. You are invited to invest your capital in a bank above that offers you eternal interest, and like all bankrupt concerns, dilutes the gullible by promising too much profit. Your alms are being given secretly, and he that seeth in secret will recompense you. Isn't that calculated to fix one eye on the reward with a leer of cunning in it, as of knowing a good thing when you do see it? One almost expects to see an image of the winkling Christ as well as the wrinkling Virgin. Such a promise is security for at least a profit of cent per cent as the rate of eternal interest. But we shall not catch a whale by merely offering a sprat in that way, not receive 100-fold in heaven for all that we may have consciously given up and forgone on earth. All that is but a survival of primitive teachings, the doctrines of the human childhood, an inducement for the individual not to be at war with the society or the church, no matter what laws or nature may have to be sanctified and violated. Not sanctified, sacrificed and violated. And the fact remains to be faced that the teaching is not true. The meek do not inherit the earth and are not going to. We are not forgiven because we are forgiving. Nature does not keep her books of account in that way. Nor are we allowed to cook the accounts in any such fashion. Our false teachers have been monstrously mistaken. The Lord of all does not carry on the business of the universe as a advertised system of bribes and fines. We cannot outset on one side of the conduct that which we have done on another. No death of Jesus can save us from ourselves. It was taught that he came to abrogate certain Jewish laws, but no, Jesus can upset the natural law of development. What we are now is the result of what we have been, and what we are hereafter will be an evolution from what we are here. There's no dodging the devil of cause and effect. Belief can work, no catalytism, change, and death for all the false teachings in the world. No blood of the Lamb will wash out one single internal blot. No tear or pity can make the stained record white. Nothing but life can work in transformation of character here or hereafter. Death cannot do it. All such teaching is entirely false. An old Scotchman known to me used to say, I like Paul. Parasol, I do like Paul, but I didn't like Jesus Christ. I kind of like Jesus Christ. They are casting it in your teeth that he did for you, and he didn't want to be did for. I'm using Scottish, end quote. The old fellow's manhood rose in revolt against the salvation of the savage mind by means of bloodshed and a vicarious atonement, and he was in the right. We do not want to be died for, and if we did, it would be unavailing. We can no more be died for another life than the law will allow us to be died for in this. Men like Jesus or Jehoshaphat ben Tandera, the Jewish political and social reformer, or Bruno or Garibaldi or Gordon or Garfield are, in a sense, saviors of the world. They set before us an illuminated image of immortal love. They pull down on themselves and bear for us the heavy burdens of martyrdom because of the wolfish selfishness of the world. But there is no salvation possible for us out of the mere act of their suffering. The only salvation is for those who range themselves on the side of these martyrs and reformers and forerunners against the selfishness of the world to work and change the crude conditions of things, which forever demand the sacrifice of the best and dearest of women and men. When Arno von Wickenreg took the double armful of the enemy's spears into his own breast, it was to make a way for his fellow countrymen to pass on and widen the gap he had made, not for them to stay behind and put him on the back, or merely subscribe to erect a statue to his memory. That the innocent are continually offered up on account of the besotted selfishness of the many is a fact. That they must continue to be thus offered up until the world awakes to see the shameful sacrifice of others to save its own selfishness is likewise a fact. But to erect this into a religious dogma and call it the divine means of saving men who willfully, continually, and necessitate the conditions of society which cause and demand the martyrdom is about the most immoral and damnable doctrine ever offered to humanity. Why? This doctrine of atonement is so unmanly, so cowardly and curtish that it put in its naked truth the lowest rough in Whitechapel, if unperverted by orthodoxy, would be too manly to accept such a immoral mode of salvation. Anyone who would consent to be saved at the expense of another, an innocent person, ought only to escape, if at all, because he would not be worth the damning. Far nobler was the teachings of Captain George W. Pendleton of the Cleopatra of Gloucester, Massachusetts. His vessel was doomed and sinking fast when the boat put off from the Lord Gout, end quote, with a crew that volunteered to try and rescue the shipwrecked man. But with salvation in sight, the American captain, by agreement with his men, hauled down his own flag of distress. He thought the boat could live in such a sea. Quote, I said to my men, shall we let those brave fellows risk their lives to save ours? And they said, no. Then I halted down the flag, end quote. And so they deliberately elected to die first. That was the gospel according to George Pendleton. But this sacrifice of the innocent to save the guilty of others instead of self is the religion of savages. It belongs to the most banal conditions of the human race, and as such is doomed to die out of any state of true civilization. The doom of historical Christianity is sealed because it was based upon dogmas against which the highest instinct of the race will forever rise in insurrection, and doctrines that are certain to be rejected by the growing moral sense of enfranchised humanity. From what I have learned of the interior operations of natural law, such selfishness defeats its own end and aims. The only way of helping oneself is by helping others. The only true way of receiving is by giving. The fear of being lost never yet saved the soul of any man. Put aside the fable and the foolish fraud that has been founded on it, and we are face to face with the fact that man has no power to lose his own soul or damn himself for all eternity. If man be immortal by nature, continually it's not based on morality, however much he may retard development by limiting his life to the lower self, which may be a hell to think of and struggle out of hereafter. Nor is the hereafter a heaven provided on purpose to make up for the man-made sufferings to those who have been deluded and cheated and starved out of their life in this world. If it were so, then Providence would not only be responsible for all the mal-arrangement and the misery, through not simply allowing it, but for permitting it and providing for it. Whereas we see the wrong is remediable, the sufferings are unnecessary, and the Christian way out of it is a misleading cul-de-sac. It is like some of the squirrel tracks in the forest with the trail ending up a tree. The Orthodox teachings are so false that they have made the utterance of truth a blasphemy, and all the proclaimers of truth blasphemers. Oppose their savage to theology, and you are denounced as an atheist. Expose the folly of their faith, and you are an infidel all round. Deny their miracles, and they damn your morals. The Christian rock, not knowing what to say against me that was good enough, charged me with having published a volume of indecent poetry. It was a malicious lie, a real innocence of original sin. But that was what the ignoramus said, mistaking me, as I suppose, for Mr. Swinburne. There was something grand in the ancient martyrdom suffered by the heroes of free thought, whereas the modern reformer has to endure the prolonged torture and the enormity of being kicked to death by butterflies or gnawed to death by gnats. The religion founded on misunderstood and perverted mythology has made every wrong and nothing short of an utter reverse, but all nature for our guide and on our side can set us right. Its hypothesis of sorrows, of suffering and sacrifice is entirely false, because these are on account of that which, like the quote fall of man, end quote, never really occurred. And we weeping over that which is not real is nothing more than a waste of water. Nature offers no evidence that man was meant to moan as a miserable animal. It is true that sorrow and suffering may purge and purify the life and add a precious seed into our sight. That which gives the wound, that is wound, may deposit the pearl. The iron of a steadfast soul has frequently been forged in purgatory fires of pain. The greater the pressure from without, the more has it evoked and evolved the rebounding spirit from within. But that is because there is a power which can turn all experience to account if our life be right in its root relationship. And human life will always have its full share of sorrow and suffering. But nothing can be falser, that is, than to try and find a religion on sorrow and suffering. by the representation of this world as destined to be a vale of tears, which we are bound to grow anxiously to get out of as soon as we recognize that we are in it. No, it is not in sorrow, but in joy that we can attain the greatest unconsciousness of self and live the largest objective life for others. We learn as we come to a knowledge of joy that all sorrow and sufferings are but the passing shadows of things mortal and not the enduring or eternal reality. When no longer darkened or eclipsed by the false creed which has beguiled our minds and totally obscured so many natural truths, we can see to the end of these shadows. We can overlook them in the larger intellectual light of a truer interpretation of the necessities of evolution and of the human environment. If nature has one revelation of truth to make more plainly apparent than another, it is that her creature, man, is intended for health and happiness here in this life and not merely hereafter, on condition of suffering here. Pleasure is the natural accomplishment of our creative and productive activities, and the human likeness of life itself is concealed and imagined in delight. Health, physical or mental, means happiness, and everywhere the pull of the natural forces and elements are on the side of health, and therefore of consequence or premeditated happiness. Children of the blind who never saw, being born to see, and the children of the deaf mutes, being born to talk. That delight in life was intended by means of health and happiness may likewise be read in the stern punishment administered by name for every breach of natural law by which we injure our health and destroy our happiness, unless the personal memory of the fact for one generation should be too short-lived. The results and effects of the violated law are kept before us, in some cases from generation to generation, not as glibbers, or mere vengeance, but as signposts pointing to the way of reformation. Health is intended, and happiness is the result. It is the happy who will be moral, not the miserable. Now the Christian scheme would make us miserable in order that we may be moral here and happy hereafter. Whereas nature says, be happy here and now, by learning the laws of health, individual, social, political, universal, by getting rid of all opposing falsehood, and establishing the true condition for evolving health and happiness everywhere for all. But it actually been urged in reply to me in the rest of judgment, quote, supposing the Christian narrative to be entirely mythical, is not the supreme legend of divinest pity a beautiful and touching story? End quote. Yes, and the more beautiful the deceit, the deeper the delusion. If it were only a dramatic representation, the plea would apply, but this thing has no meaning if it is not humanly true. The supreme legend of divine pity. That is pity for a fallen race on the part of a supposed deity who damned mankind forever for the stealing of an apple. Why? Our own unpaid magistrates, who are not over lenient, would not have made more of it than a matter of 14 days or a month or most. Suppose you do touch the heart of the world upon false pretenses, even to the extent of drawing a tear from John Morley, Morley, or getting a perfumed pastille offered up as a sweet savor and sacrificial smoke by Renan, where is the gain when once the falsehood is found out. As soon as the theologian Scotsman discovers that his foundation of belief in the fall of man in predestination, hellfire, and eternal damnation are false, he naturally takes to whiskey, and maybe for the rest of his life cannot find a brand that is quite fiery enough. The illusion of false ideas is always at war with reality. That's a good quote. The illusion of false ideas is always at war with reality. The Christ of the Gnostics was a true ideal, possibly to all men, but a historical Christ is a false idea. When and where is the sense of supposing a God sliding down to earth on a ladder with no steps to it, and then asking us to walk up minus the foothold? Also, it is in vain we set up an objective ideal for outer worship of that which can only be a reality within the soul. So what he's talking about. Simply, you're worshiping an outer God. You're worshiping outside. What's need to be doing is looking within. The God-man of the Gnosis was not a man-God, but the God or divine nature in man. I'll say that again, folks. The God-man, little g, God-man of the Gnostics was not a man-God, but these are all lower g's, but the God or divine nature in man is already there. You just got to find it, you see, which represents the spiritual image of the invisible God, the formless in our human form, not in our human form of individual personality as a historical Christ or Horus or Buddha. That was but the symbolic representment of the matter. The historical realization was meant for all men and women, not for one man, Jesus, or one female, Sophia. We do not want to be beguiled or to have our children deceived any longer with the most beautiful biography of the man in the moon, who came down too soon and whose second coming has been looked for so vainly during 1800 years. We are in search and need of some truer illumination than moonshine. Having discovered that these beautiful legends are mythical and non-human, we do not want the little ones to be misled for life by false teachings before ever they have learned to think. The illusion of false ideas is imaginative glamour with which metaphilios seduce the soul of Faust, F-A-U-S-T. A woman who sent to the lending library for a book that would make her cry was in search of a false idea in a world brimming over with bitter reality. A minister of the gospel had been telling his little boy a tale that was full of human interest, and the child had been deeply affected by it. But looking up with tears in his eyes, he asked, "Is that true, Papa, or is it only preaching?" End quote. Poor child, he had heard so much from the same source that he had looked upon it as being not necessarily true, but only, quote, preaching, end quote. That child's position is ours, but all we know, the story is untrue. And we have done forever with the old wives' fables, that is, and romances of mythology as a foundation for religion. We have done with a quote word of God, end quote, that is in a fatal opposition to his truth as manifested in nature. We have done with the very God himself, who, when traced to his origin, is found to be chief one of the seven devils or elementaries of mythology, and who is quite worthy of that origin in many aspects of his character. We have lost the power to make believe and deceive ourselves further in that matter. It cannot be too often repeated that the foundations of the Christian faith were laid in falsehood and ignorance. The fall of man in the beginning was not a fact, and consequently there could be no curse. It is but a fable misinterpreted, and the redemption of the New Testament is based upon a fable in the Old. There is no virtue nor efficacy in a vicarious atonement, and no priesthood ever had or will have the power to forgive sin, to break the sequence between cause and effect, or to evade the nimbus or of natural law. When the great delusion comes to an end, in true epitaph would be, quote, "This was a fraud founded on a fable," end quote. Meanwhile, the church that continues to put forth this scheme of salvation and impose it on the public as expense of the nation, and in brackets is some 8 or 10 million annually, in bracket, ought not only to be disestablished and disendowed, it ought to be prosecuted for obtaining money on demonstrable false pretenses. We're often told that our civilization is infinitely indebted to Christianity, but on the other hand, it could be shown that Christianity has been infinitely indebted to civilization because it became the adopted religion, the official religion of the races that happen to be in the swim and currents of European progress. Indeed, our European progress has been in exact proportion to the civil law and pre-extant common law have got the upper hand of the ecclesiastic usurpation. What did Christianity do for Italy, its birthplace? If it was such a renovator of the ancient, uh, worn out world, why did it not renew old Rome when its salvation had been adopted? What did it do for Greece or for Egypt, for the Mexicans, for any of the ancient races or civilization? As Gerald said truly, quote, we owe much to the Jews, end quote. But what do the Jews owe to Christianity? Its success has been a parasite fed on the life of the recent races. The line of renewal was that of the races, whereas all the good results have been claimed for the Christian creed. Thatcher, I should say, was once attracted to an elderly gentleman at table who was in the habit of maintaining that everything really good or great in modern literature came directly or indirectly from Pindar, Pindar, quote, at all events, end quote. And one of the guests, quote, Pindar did not write Vanity Fair, end quote. Quote, yes, sir, end quote, said the old gentleman with his customary assurance. Quote, yes, sir, he did. In the highest, noblest sense, Pindar did write Vanity Fair, end quote. In like manner, it's been, in like manner, it has been the custom to label every virtue as Christian that has been evolved as human, ages and ages before our own era, at which time every good thing was redated Christian and renamed, as it were the result of a historical crisis. Indeed, one expert to hear of the elements of pure air, fresh water, and clean sunlight being christened under this name in the same way that the well-known healing by means of mental medicine, which was practiced by the pre-Christian races, had been designated, quote, Christian healing, end quote. We shall probably have Christian lunacy or Christian idiocy. Yet the fact remains that the direst, bloodiest enemies of the human race in Europe have been the most besotted supporters of the doctrines called Christian. Correct. No doubt about it. On the other hand, if it were possible to eliminate from the factors in European civilization the direct worth and hereditary influences of those freethinkers who have not accepted the historical Christian creed, what think you would remain of the progress that was made during many centuries? The only hold the system has ever attained on the most intellectual of men has been the hold of the rack, the death grip of the stake, the fear here, folks. The rack, the church used that. William Wallace, you think about that story, the movie. Most people don't even know that. That's been over 20 some years ago. I guess it's been 25 years ago that movie was done. And the embracing fires of martyrdom has ever struck you how little the great minds of the past, the Shakespeares and Goethes, those, quote, serene creators of immortal things, end quote, troubled themselves about Christianity, how lofty they tower and overtook it. What preacher from the pulpit ever thinks of arranging the present social conditions as based on the rights of the stronger and the wrongs of the weaker? On the contrary, it has been accepted as a divine arrangement that suffering humanity was the cheapest thing with a never-ending supply for manuring the soul, for manuring the soil, for the greasing of wheels, for coining money out of. They never question whether this is the right basis of the natural law, natural life. They rejoice in the scriptural assurance that the poor you have always with you on purpose to keep down the prices of labor. Or we may add, keep up the supply of children to the brothels of the rich at the lowest possible figure. Christian civilization today is compatible with such a state of society as was recently revealed by the Pall Mall Gazette. You have been assured, I've been assured that the one great sacrifice of the Son of God did put an end to the individual human sacrifice. But Christianity has been comparable with the masses of people of Europe being offered up forever in one great sacrifice. And what matters the mode if you are sacrificed? Honey and milk are sacrificed to thee, King. Sorry, say this again. Honey and milk are sacrificed to thee, kind Hermes, inexpensive deity. but Hercules demand a lamb each day for keeping, as he said, the wolves away. What matter it meet, browsers of the sod, whether a wolf devour you or a god? End quote. The pretended stewards of the mysteries of God have left it for the future to create the very consciousness of wrong in a miraculous ways that their religion has never yet taken into account. As the dogs of dives, they have now and again given a lick to the sores of Lazarus and promised him the healing hereafter. But when have they banded together and fought against the social system that dooms the many to poverty, that creates Lazarus as well as his sores? When they have made large fortunes and grown very rich and death is drawing near, some Christians do wax charitable and grow liberal of alms. They do build large and comfortable houses for broken down paupers to die in. They do supply hospitals for the refuge of those who are ailing and afflicted, but a good deal of money has been donated for hellfire insurance. Perhaps these paupers were left all through their working life to pig together in howls and slums, the breeding places of pestilence, which were sure to create the diseases you treat so generously when too late. They starve and suffer and sicken. Their wealth might accumulate for others. Peabody bequests are all very well in their way, but if the Peabody wealth had been spent in preventing the poverty and crime in the nation instead of being wrung out of labor and accumulating to cause these evils, how much better and more blessed would have been the prevention than the late attempt to cure, or rather to help bolster up a state of things when in relief of its running sores. We do not want to become paupers, as we must ever be if we are to be forever pauperized. On reading lately that Belgravely had turned out to carry its broken victuals rounds and scrap carts to the starving poor, I declare it stuck a glow of shame into my face, as if I had received the insult of a blow, to think of the unnecessary necessity. You need not wonder if the poor should damn the charity that it offered to them in the name of religion, as a bribe for them not to ask for justice, or that they should turn a deaf ear to all talk about the bread of heaven when they lack the bread of earth, or the milk of human kindness when their babes are perishing for lack of little morning milk from the cow. It is here that Christianity, after 1800 years, is ultra failure. And these are some of the things that coming religion must go to the root of to be of any use for this world or any other. I know a poor old man in England who for 40 years worked for one firm and his three generations of proprietors. He began as a wage of 16 shillings, I guess that is, per week. It's got 16S, I don't know what that means. I guess it's shillings per week, and worked his way. As he grew older and older, and many accessories of life grew dearer and dearer, down to 6 shillings a day, 6 shillings a week. And still he kept on working and would not give up. At 6 shillings a week, he broke a limb and left work at last, being pensioned off by the firm with a fourpenny piece. I know wherever I speak for that man was my father. At the same time, as you are well aware, during those 40 years, any possessor of capital might have put it out to usury, and without lifting a finger himself, it would have been quadrupled. Such are two of our naturalized laws of capital and labor. The one is the complement of the other. You cannot have the one without the other, and any religion that is not directly to help revolutionize the state of society is damned already, under whatsoever name. We never can attain the statue of true manhood or be man, so long as we will unman ourselves by taking such unmanly advantage as we do our most ignorant and hitto helpless fellow men. No one class of men can hold another with their faces to the ground or noses to the grindstone, without also stooping over them in the manner that forever hinders from attaining the perfect stature of genuine manhood. The degradation through difference is shared in common, and mark you, these things are done as effectively by aid of our social system and laws of supply and demand as if one man stood over another with the whip of the slave driver or sword of the executor in his hand. The wrong and the responsibility, crueler, and the cowardlessness are none the less because they are warranted by custom, sustained by legal enactments, defended by the press. At the recent utterance of the Archbishop of York, who spoke of our continual doubting of the power of the rich by having the wages of the poor, we shall doubtless hear more from the echoers. But the redemption preached for 1800 years has failed to save the world, and it must now give way for other workers with other methods applied to such matters as the problem of poverty, the distribution of wealth, and the ownership of land. In vain will they claim and Christian every good work of cooperation, that is communism or socialism as Christian by name, the good Lord Jesus, end quote, as objective Savior and historical Christ has, quote, has his day, end quote. Our science applied to civilization will part company more and more with the found out fraud and will help to carry it no further. Its triumphs will not be made or allowed to support the Christian delusion in the future any more than in the past. What is the chief cause of this novel interest in the churches on behalf of the poor today? It is not fear that the new electorate will reject the Orthodox system and that their political influence will prove fatal to the church. And now the question is being asked, quote, what is going to take the place of the cast out faith, or it is already cast out from the minds of the men who will surely mold the freer thought of the future? It's not going to be reestablished by law, nor by the blood and fire of the Salvation Army, nor by presenting our cast-off clothes to the Aborigines, nor by teaching blind Chinamen to read the Bible, not only to be reestablished, even though more Bibles have been printed during the last 10 years than in all the preceding centuries, is being rejected or at home faster than you can give it away abroad. We have had our religion based on belief in a God who cared an infinite deal more for a few apples than for the eternal damnation of merits of immortal souls. A God who played fast and loose with the laws of his own nature and creation. A creed based on the divine truth of every lie that science has exploded. A belief that was in deadly opposition to all and every truth that has been established. A, quote, good old faith, end quote, which is a fraud. So far as being saved by it goes, founded upon a legend misinterpreted, and at last the old generals of and at last the old grounds of belief are breaking up rapidly, no matter what fresh efforts may be made to deceive, delude, and secure the ignorant, infants, or the aborigines. The Orthodox creed is doomed to reversal, even as a dish is wiped clean and turned upside down. The foundations of the false, crude, and gory faith are all afloat. It was built as the Russians reared their palace on the frozen river of Neva, Neva, and the great thaw has come suddenly upon them. The ominous sounds of the final breakup are in their ears. Their anchorage and place of trust is crumbling before their eyes, for they had built on the very thing or condition of things which have sealed up the running springs and stayed the stream of progress in its course, I should say. They have arrested for the purpose of resting, and here is the hint of science, of nature, or spiritualism, of philosophical, of free thought, in every form that they must move on and get out of the way or be moved off forever. The Orthodox religion has been dying in proportion as it lost the power to persecute. People now inquire, quote, what next, end quote, as they did the tadpole when his tail dropped off. What next? And if we were going to straightaway put forth a new tail, but that is not the way of nature. She works by transformation, not by repetition, and her changes imply growth as the outcome of a new life. It's not possible for us to swap creeds or formulate a new religion. Religion is not a set of precepts or a mode of worship. It is not a creed that counts in the eternal court. It's not what we believe or profess, but what we are when stripped bare in the balance. Nothing avails but the life lived. Our past deeds must and will make our future state. Some people seem to think that spiritualism is all about to give up a new tail, or at least to put a to put a firmatad tag on the old limp status of Christianity, to bind us anew with a fresh support. They're wondering when the spiritualists are going to open their Sunday shop for the purpose of prayer and praise. But I doubt whether that mode of procedure will ever be repeated in this world. When Sidney Smith saw his child tenderly stroking the hard shell of a tortoise to please the tortoise, he said, "Well, you might just as well stroke the dome of you, you might just as well stroke the dome of St. Paul's Cathedral with the idea of pleasing the dean and chapel chapters." End quote. So when we see people crowding together to worship and praise and flatter the Lord as if they fancied they could gratify his self-esteem or excite his benevolence or keep his destructiveness quiet, it reminds me irresistibly of the child stroking the tortoise to please it. The offering of words of praise which people make to show their love of God is of no more value than the cheap oblations of sham banknotes which the Chinese burn to any amount as a sacrifice to their deities. They offer money by millions in that way. The only worthy way of showing love to God is working for humanity. That is the practical test. The Lord does not want your long and loud laudations or offerings of false money. Hermes said, quote, "There can be no religion more true or just than to know the things that are," end quote. We have had a religion without knowledge, and the coming religion must be founded on knowledge, and it must be good for this world as it warranted for being good for any other. In knowledge only can we find a common ground of agreement. That which is based upon knowledge need not be the subject of everlasting diversity and contention among innumerable sects. We need a first-hand acquaintanceship with the facts of nature, not limiting nature. However, to the little we may know of it at present, you see. Of course, mere facts are not everything. No number of separate vertical joints will supply a man with a backbone. We have to collect the various joints in our scattered facts derived from a closer acquaintanceship with the truer interpretation of nature. But life alone can produce the unity and the cohesion which constitutes a backbone. Among these facts, we naturally assign a foremost place to those of spiritualistic phenomena, which the Orthodox as good as prohibited to their fathers in favor of theoretical teaching. Okay, I'm going to stop here, and we'll conclude this in a little bit here. So bear with me, a little over an hour here long, and we'll get back with you in a little while here. So thank you for listening. This is part of the work by Gerald Massey. As I've shared here, The Coming Religion by Gerald Massey in his last part of his book here. Thank you.